In this imagined TLC-style scenario, the most terrifying part is not that Jenny is lying in a hospital bed surrounded by machines, doctors, and worried faces, because the real shock is what Sumit has already done outside that room while trying to keep her treatment going. The calf he once believed could give them stability, independence, and some kind of secure future in India is gone. And Sumit has sold it because the hospital expenses are climbing faster than he can handle them. He has given up the one thing that was supposed to protect their future, and now he is sitting beside Jenny, wondering whether that sacrifice came early enough to actually save her. That is what makes this situation so brutal. Because only days earlier, Sumit was still trying to convince himself that Jenny would improve once doctors got her weakness under control. He kept telling himself that she needed rest, treatment, and time, and once those things were given to her, they would eventually walk back through their front door and laugh about how terrified they had both been. Instead, every update seems to move in the opposite direction, and the longer Jenny remains in that hospital, the harder it becomes for Sumit to keep pretending this is simply another difficult chapter they are going to push through together. Jenny looks exhausted in a way Sumit has never seen before, and even when she tries to speak normally, he can hear the weakness underneath her voice. She is trying to stay calm because she can see exactly what this is doing to him, but that only makes the situation more painful. Sumit keeps watching her face for tiny signs that she is feeling better, almost as if one smile, one stronger sentence, or one normal movement might prove that everything is turning around. But every time a doctor walks into the room, his attention immediately shifts because he is waiting for somebody to finally tell him the words he wants to hear. Those words never seem to come. Instead, the doctors want to keep monitoring Jenny, they want to continue treatment, and they are not ready to talk about sending her home. Sumit begins to understand that this could become a much longer hospital stay than he expected. And that realization opens a second crisis that is almost as frightening as the first one. Their money was already tight before this happened, their regular bills have not disappeared, and treatment costs are now becoming another pressure sitting on top of everything they were already struggling with. At first, Sumit tries to hide that part from Jenny because he does not want her worrying about money while she is trying to get stronger. Whenever his phone rings, he steps away from the bed, lowers his voice, and tells her that it is nothing important. But Jenny knows him too well to believe that. She notices the tension in his face when he checks his phone. She notices how long he stays outside the room, and she notices that every time he comes back, he forces himself to look calmer than he actually feels. Jenny eventually asks him what is happening, and Sumit gives her the answer people give when they are terrified of admitting the truth. He tells her everything is being handled. But everything is not being handled. Sumit is doing calculations in his head every hour, looking at what money they have, what can be delayed, what can be borrowed, and how long any of those options could realistically keep them going. The problem is that none of those numbers give him the one thing he needs most, which is certainty. He does not know how long Jenny will need treatment. He does not know what additional expenses could appear, and he definitely does not know whether paying those expenses will actually bring her back to the life they had before. That helplessness is completely different from the problems Sumit has spent years fighting. When his family opposed Jenny, there was somebody to argue with. When people criticized their age difference, there was somebody to prove wrong. When their marriage became surrounded by pressure and judgment, Sumit could keep insisting that he loved Jenny and that they deserved to make their own choices. This time, there is nobody standing across from him. There is no family member he can convince, no cultural expectation he can reject, and no argument strong enough to make Jenny healthy again. There is only a hospital room, a growing bill, and the woman he has spent years fighting to keep beside him. That is when the calf first enters his mind. The idea feels almost impossible at first because that calf is not just a place where Sumit works. It represents one of the few things in their life that still feels like it belongs to their future. It is income, security, independence, and something Sumit can point to whenever people question whether he and Jenny have built anything stable together. Selling it would mean solving one emergency by creating another. But once Sumit looks back through the hospital door and sees Jenny lying there, the question changes completely. He is no longer asking whether selling the calf is a good financial decision. He is asking himself what that calf is worth if Jenny never gets the chance to come home. And before Jenny even realizes how serious their money problem has become, Sumit starts making calls that could change both of their lives forever. The frightening thing about a medical crisis is that the emotional panic does not stop practical problems from arriving at the same time, and Sumit discovers that almost immediately. While he is worried about Jenny's condition, he is also being forced to think about payments, income, transportation, regular household expenses, and the fact that every additional day in the hospital could push them deeper into a situation they may not be able to recover from easily. Sumit keeps telling Jenny that she should not think about any of that, But the more he tries to protect her, the more suspicious she becomes. She watches him leave the room for another phone call, and this time, when he comes back, she does not let the conversation disappear. She asks him directly whether there is a problem with the hospital expenses, and Sumit hesitates just long enough to confirm what she already knows. Jenny immediately becomes worried, not because she wants to leave the hospital before she is ready, but because she understands what their finances look like, and she knows Sumit does not have some hidden pile of money waiting for a disaster like this. She knows what they have struggled with, she knows how carefully they have tried to rebuild their life, and she knows that one major emergency can destroy years of planning faster than almost anything else. Sumit tells her not to worry, because he has options. What he does not tell her is that those options are disappearing. He has already looked at savings, already thought about borrowing, and already considered who he could call for help, but each solution seems temporary. Even if someone gives him money today, what happens if Jenny needs more treatment tomorrow? Even if he delays one payment outside the hospital, what happens when that payment becomes another problem next week? This is where Sumit's mind starts moving toward the CAF more seriously. At first, he thinks about using it to raise money without losing it completely, but the more urgent the situation feels, the less realistic complicated solutions become. He does not have months to negotiate. He does not even feel like he has weeks. What he needs is money that can be available quickly, and the CAF is the biggest thing he has that might actually make a meaningful difference. The emotional contradiction is painful because the CAF represents exactly what Sumit and Jenny have been trying to create after so many years of instability. Their relationship has always been filled with uncertainty. Would Sumit's family accept Jenny? Would Sumit actually go through with the marriage? Could they build a stable life in India? Could they become financially independent enough that every disagreement did not feel like a threat to their future? The CAF was supposed to be part of that answer. It was supposed to mean they were moving forward. Now Sumit is considering destroying that security because the future suddenly feels meaningless compared with what is happening today. He begins discussing the possibility of a sale without telling Jenny, because he already knows what she will say. Jenny has sacrificed too much for him to simply watch him give up something important without fighting back. She would tell him to slow down, think carefully, look for another option, and stop making a permanent decision while he is scared. The problem is that fear is exactly what is driving Sumit. He is terrified that waiting for the perfect solution could cost him time they do not have. So while Jenny believes Sumit is still looking for ways to manage the bills, he quietly starts looking for someone willing to buy the CAF. That decision says a lot about where his head is in this moment. Because Sumit is not thinking like a businessman anymore. A businessman wants the best possible price. A businessman waits for the right buyer. A businessman protects the value of what he has spent time building. Sumit wants speed. If somebody is willing to make an acceptable offer and complete the sale quickly, he is prepared to listen. Because every extra day feels connected to Jenny's condition in his mind. That makes the negotiation emotionally dangerous. The people he is speaking with do not feel the pressure he feels. They do not have Jenny lying in a hospital bed while they make the decision. They can walk away. Sumit feels like he cannot. And that difference puts him in the weakest possible position. Still, he keeps going. When he returns to Jenny, she notices that his behavior has changed. He is quieter, more distracted, and strangely determined, as though he has already decided something, but is waiting for the right moment to say it. Jenny asks him again what he is hiding. Sumit looks at her and says that he is taking care of something. That answer bothers Jenny even more because after everything they have been through, she knows exactly what Sumit looks like when he is keeping a major decision to himself. She tells him she does not want him doing anything reckless because of her. That sentence hits him harder than she realizes. Because from Jenny's perspective, selling the CAF might be reckless. From Sumit's perspective, keeping it while worrying that money could limit her treatment would be far worse. He does not want to explain that yet, because once he says it aloud, Jenny will try to stop him. So he changes the subject, asks how she is feeling, adjusts her blanket, and waits until she closes her eyes again. Then he steps outside the room and answers another call. The buyer is ready to move forward, and Sumit now has to choose between telling Jenny before the deal is finished or making the decision alone and dealing with her reaction afterward. He chooses the second option. Because by this point, Sumit has convinced himself that Jenny can be angry with him later. He just needs her to be there later. When Sumit finally signs away the CAF, there is no celebration, no relief, and no feeling that he has completed some smart financial move. Because the entire transaction feels more like he is cutting away a piece of the future he imagined for himself and Jenny. He looks at the paperwork and understands exactly what he is giving up, but he also understands why he is doing it. And that makes turning back almost impossible. The money matters immediately. Bills that had been sitting in the back of his mind can now be addressed. And Sumit finally feels as though he has bought them some breathing room. For the first time in days, he can focus on Jenny without calculating every expense at the same time. But that relief lasts only until Jenny learns where the money came from. She does not find out, because Sumit sits down and calmly explains the decision. She realizes something major has happened because Sumit becomes less evasive whenever money is discussed. And after pressing him again, she finally gets the truth. The calf is gone. Jenny stares at him as though she thinks she misunderstood. Then, the reality lands. She asks him why he would do something that big without speaking to her first. And Sumit immediately tells her that if he had spoken to her first, she would have tried to stop him. Jenny does not deny it. Of course she would have tried to stop him. Because Jenny understands that this hospital stay will eventually end one way or another. But Sumit will still have to live with whatever decisions he makes during it. If she recovers, they still need somewhere to live, they still need money, and they still need a way to rebuild their future. From Jenny's point of view, Sumit has taken one crisis and attached another crisis to it. But Sumit sees the decision completely differently. He tells her that he could not sit beside her worrying about whether they could afford to keep doing everything possible while knowing he had something valuable he could sell. He tells her that the calf means nothing to him compared with her life, and even if they have to start over financially, at least they will have the chance to start over together. Jenny becomes emotional, because there is no easy way to answer that. She is angry that he kept it from her. She is frightened by what the sale means. But underneath both of those emotions is the realization that Sumit has just made one of the biggest sacrifices of their relationship. That matters because viewers have spent years watching Jenny make the more visible sacrifices. Jenny left a familiar life behind. Jenny moved across the world. Jenny dealt with rejection from Sumit's family. Jenny accepted years of uncertainty, while Sumit tried to separate what he wanted from what everyone around him expected. For a long time, the biggest criticism of Sumit was that Jenny seemed to be risking more. This moment flips that argument. Nobody is forcing Sumit to sell the calf. His parents are not standing over him. Jenny is not demanding it. There is no ultimatum. He makes the choice privately, because when he looks at what he owns and then looks at Jenny, he decides there is nothing to compare. That is powerful. But it is also where this story becomes much darker. Because sacrifice feels meaningful when it solves something. Sumit has just given up the calf, but Jenny is still in the hospital. The money can pay for doctors, the money can pay for treatment, the money can remove some immediate financial pressure. What it cannot buy is certainty. Sumit cannot hand the doctors the money and demand a guarantee that Jenny will get stronger. He cannot sell one more thing and force her body to respond. That realization begins creeping into his mind even before Jenny's condition changes again. For a short period, there is hope. Jenny seems calmer. Sumit is less distracted. They even begin speaking about what they might do once she comes home. Jenny tells him he is going to regret selling the calf when she is back on her feet and ordering him around again. Sumit smiles, because that is exactly the version of Jenny he wants to imagine. He tells her they will figure it out. They can find another business, they can make different plans, they can start again. Nothing matters as long as they leave the hospital together. It is one of those moments where both of them are trying to speak the future into existence because the alternative is too painful to discuss. Then the atmosphere changes. Jenny becomes noticeably more exhausted. The doctors start spending more time in the room. A nurse checks on her again sooner than Sumit expects. He notices the shift immediately because when you have been sitting beside someone in a hospital long enough, you begin reading the room before anybody explains what is happening. Sumit asks whether everything is okay. He does not get the simple answer he wants. They need to monitor Jenny more closely. That phrase destroys the tiny bit of comfort he had just started to feel. Because selling the calf was supposed to be the biggest dramatic turn. It was supposed to be the moment where Sumit gave everything he could and finally created some hope. Instead, the story moves in the opposite direction. Jenny's condition becomes more serious after the sacrifice has already been made. And now Sumit has to confront a possibility he has been refusing to acknowledge. He may have given up everything he could control, while the one thing that matters most remains completely outside his control. The room feels different once the doctors become more concerned, and Sumit does not need anyone to explain that to him because he can see it in the pace around Jenny. There are more conversations happening just outside the room, and more moments where Sumit asks a question, but receives an answer that feels careful rather than reassuring. Jenny is increasingly exhausted, and even her attempts to calm Sumit become harder. He sits beside her and keeps telling her that she needs to rest, but the truth is that Sumit is the one who looks like he is falling apart. He barely leaves the room unless somebody forces him to. He keeps his phone close but hardly looks at anything unrelated to Jenny, and every normal problem from their life suddenly feels ridiculous compared with the possibility sitting in front of him. This is where the calf sale becomes almost cruel emotionally. Sumit did exactly what people say you are supposed to do when someone you love is in trouble. He acted. He sacrificed. He found money. He removed one obstacle, Yet Jenny still gets worse. That is the moment when Sumit begins understanding that some situations do not reward effort in the way people expect. He can love Jenny completely and still be helpless. He can give up every possession he owns and still be helpless. He can sit beside her every second and still be helpless. For someone like Sumit, who has spent years surviving by finding ways around impossible situations, that feeling is almost unbearable. Think about everything this relationship has already survived. There were family objections that looked impossible to overcome. There were secrets and complications that could have ended the relationship completely. There were moments when Jenny had every reason to decide that waiting for Sumit was destroying too much of her life. There were moments when Sumit could have chosen the easier path and walked away. Somehow, they kept finding another way forward. That history creates its own kind of confidence. After enough years of surviving chaos together, you start believing that the two of you are simply built to survive whatever comes next. That belief is being tested now. Because Jenny cannot argue her way out of a medical crisis, Sumit cannot charm his way out of it. Their love story, which has always been about refusing to accept what other people said was possible, has finally reached something that does not care how stubborn either of them is. At one point, Sumit leaves the room while doctors continue monitoring Jenny, and the moment he gets into the hallway, the composure disappears. He presses his hands against his face and tries to breathe normally. He is not crying because somebody has told him the worst has happened. He is crying because nobody can promise him that it will not. That uncertainty is sometimes worse than bad news because your mind keeps creating possibilities faster than anyone can answer them. Sumit starts thinking about everything he and Jenny have not done yet. The ordinary things are what hurt most. Another morning together. Another argument over something stupid. Another meal. Another trip. Another year. When a relationship has been defined by huge dramatic obstacles, it is easy to forget that the reward was never supposed to be one giant romantic moment. The reward was supposed to be normal life. That is what Sumit is terrified of losing. Jenny notices his red eyes when he comes back into the room, even though he tries to hide them. She asks him if the doctors said something he is not telling her. He says no. This time he is telling the truth. Nobody has given him some secret terrible update. He is simply scared. Jenny reaches for his hand and tells him that he cannot keep looking at her like she is disappearing. That line almost breaks him again. He tells her he is not thinking that way. Jenny knows he is lying. Then she asks the question he has been avoiding since the moment this became serious. What happens to you if I do not get better quickly? Sumit immediately refuses to answer. He tells her she is going to get better, and they are not having that conversation. Jenny pushes once more because she is not asking only about the hospital. She is asking about the calf. She is asking about the money. She is asking about the life Sumit has just rearranged around trying to save her. She tells him that he cannot destroy everything he has built. Sumit looks at her and finally says what has clearly been sitting inside him since he made the sale. There is nothing worth building if he has to choose it over her. That sounds romantic, but inside this room it lands differently. It sounds desperate. Because Sumit is not making some grand declaration in front of cameras and family members. He is trying to convince Jenny, and maybe himself, that losing the calf does not matter. The frightening truth is that the calf may only be the beginning. If Jenny's treatment continues, more expenses may come. If recovery takes time, their income situation becomes even harder. If she eventually leaves the hospital, they could be starting from almost nothing financially. But Sumit does not care about that yet. He has reduced his entire future to one immediate goal. Jenny needs to leave this hospital with him. Everything after that can be rebuilt. Everything before that is irrelevant. And this is where the story reaches the question Sumit has spent the entire crisis trying not to ask. What if Jenny does not recover as quickly as they are hoping? By this point, Sumit has already made the sacrifice that would normally become the emotional climax of a story like this. But instead of giving him closure, selling the calf leaves him with a much more frightening realization. There is no bigger practical move waiting in the background. He cannot keep escalating forever. He cannot sell the same business twice, and he cannot keep believing that every new problem will have some object attached to it that he can exchange for a solution. He has money from the sale. Jenny has continued treatment. The doctors are watching her carefully. And now Sumit has to wait. That waiting changes him. Earlier, he was constantly making calls, calculating expenses, finding options, and trying to stay one step ahead of the crisis. Now there is less for him to do, which means there is more time for him to think. That may be the hardest part. Because when Sumit stops moving, he starts remembering. He remembers how many people said this relationship would never survive. He remembers the fights with his family. He remembers Jenny refusing to give up when giving up would have been easier. He remembers how often their entire relationship seemed to depend on one more difficult decision. For years, Sumit and Jenny have been proving that love could survive pressure. Now Sumit is learning that survival is not something love can always negotiate. That does not make the love less real. It makes the situation more painful. Jenny eventually tells Sumit that if she gets out of the hospital and discovers they have nothing left, she is going to be furious with him. Sumit actually laughs. It is one of the few normal reactions he has had in days. He tells her she can yell at him for the rest of his life if she wants. That sentence says everything about what he is asking for now. He is not asking for money back. He is not asking for the calf back. He is not even asking for their old life back. He is asking for enough time to deal with the consequences later. That is why the financial loss barely registers with him emotionally. From the outside, selling the calf looks enormous. Inside Sumit's mind, it is already done. The only thing that matters is whether Jenny improves, and if she does, the aftermath could still be brutal. They may leave the hospital facing medical expenses, reduced income, no calf, and the reality that rebuilding at their stage of life will not be easy. There may be arguments later. Jenny may still be angry that Sumit made the decision without her. Sumit may eventually understand how much pressure he placed on their future when he sold quickly. They may look back and wonder whether another option existed. But those are problems Sumit would gladly accept, because every one of those problems requires Jenny to be there. That is the hidden emotional center of this entire crisis. Sumit is not trying to preserve the comfortable version of their future anymore. He is trying to preserve any future that still includes Jenny. The calf can be replaced, money can be earned again, plans can be changed, even pride can be rebuilt. But Sumit knows there is one loss that would make all of those things meaningless to him. That realization also forces a difficult question about their relationship. For years, people focused on what Jenny sacrificed to be with Sumit, and that criticism was not hard to understand because her sacrifices were visible. She changed countries, dealt with family hostility, and spent years waiting for Sumit to fully choose the relationship. Now Sumit has made a choice nobody could mistake. He gave up something that represented security because he believed Jenny needed it more. That does not erase their past problems. It does not suddenly make every questionable decision in their relationship disappear. But it does reveal something important about where Sumit's priorities are when the situation becomes truly serious. When there is no family to impress, no argument to win, and no camera-friendly romantic gesture to make, Sumit chooses Jenny. The tragedy is that choosing her may not be enough to control what happens next. As the hours continue, Sumit remains beside her, holding on to every small positive sign, because that is all he has left to work with. If Jenny speaks more strongly, he notices. If she looks more comfortable, he notices. If a doctor appears slightly less concerned, he notices. Hope has become something he measures in tiny moments. That is very different from the huge decisions that defined their relationship before. They once talked about marriage as though getting married would solve everything. Then they learned marriage only creates a new set of challenges. They once believed financial stability would make life calmer. Now the thing that represented that stability has been sold. Every time Sumit and Jenny think they have reached the stage where their life can finally become normal, something changes the rules again. This may be the biggest change yet. Because if Jenny recovers, they will not simply return to the life they had before the hospital. They will return as two people who now understand exactly how quickly that life can disappear. Sumit will have to rebuild financially. Jenny will have to rebuild physically. And both of them will have to deal with the emotional damage of knowing how close they came to a future neither of them wanted to imagine. But there is also something strangely fitting about where Sumit ends up. He spent years asking Jenny to trust that choosing him would eventually be worth everything she had given up. Now Sumit is the one who has given something up without knowing what he will receive in return. He sold the calf without a guarantee. He paid for treatment without a guarantee. He stayed beside Jenny without a guarantee. For once, Sumit is living inside the same uncertainty Jenny accepted for years. And maybe that is why he refuses to regret the decision. If Jenny gets stronger, he will believe the calf was the easiest thing he ever had to give up. If the road becomes harder, he will still know that when the moment came, he did not protect a business before protecting his wife. That may matter more to Sumit than anything he owns. But it leaves one final question hanging over everything. Sumit has already sacrificed the calf that was supposed to secure their future. He has poured the money into keeping Jenny's treatment going. And he has reached the point where there is almost nothing left for him to control. So did Sumit make the biggest sacrifice of his life just in time to give Jenny the chance she desperately needed? Or has this crisis become so serious that even losing everything may not be enough to bring the woman he fought his entire world for back home?